Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, we praise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ask him to send peace and bless his beloved and our beloved Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Today we'll start the section on Juma and we'll continue next week as well. Bidnillah. التشديد على من ترك الجمعة بغير عذر. A severe warning for the ones who abandons the Jum'ah without an uzr. Imam Malik narrated from Safwan ibn Sulaym, he said that من ترك الجمعة ثلاث مرات من غير عذر ولا علة تبع الله على قلبه. That whoever abandons or leaves Jum'ah, 3 continuous Jum'ahs, without an uzr, without an excuse, acceptable excuse, or an illness, then his heart is stamped by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this hadith has also been connected. So this hadith mentioned that he wasn't sure because he didn't want to attribute it directly to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the chain of Imam Malik rahimahullah. So he was very cautious. He said, I'm not sure that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said this or not. But then other Imams of the Sunan meaning Abu Dawud, Sunan, Ibn Majah, Nasa'i, they connected, they found the chains that in slightly different wording connects to Rasulullah, that someone who leaves the Jum'ah tahawanan biha, that he leaves it out of laziness, he doesn't give unimportance, like he gives it ihanat, like he does it like a disrespect, like ignores the Jum'ah, instead of without an excuse and sickness. And on this is agreed that the Jum'ah, a majority of the ulama agree that Jum'ah is fard, and furthermore that is fard al-ain, that is individual fard, not just a fard kifaya, that if some people do it, the rest are excused. No, each individual person, it's fard. This is the general ruling. Yes, there are exceptions to this. Extreme emergencies, these are people, but this is something that, because you cannot really do qada of Jum'ah, right? If you miss Jum'ah, then you have to do dhuhr, or go pray Jum'ah somewhere else if there's time for it. So you missed a fard, and you can't, in the dhuhr is sort of like the replace, it will take its place, the fard of that time is dhuhr, but really you should never miss it in the first place. So you have to make sure you have to be on the time for it. So it's a fard that a person has an obligation is. But there are excuses, there are, like there's lists of the Imams have mentioned. So for example, if you have wealth, you're secure, like protecting some wealth. In the old days, it wasn't safes and banks and things that way we can secure wealth, and you have to watch it. And if you leave it, that'll be, somebody might take it and so forth. Then a person in such situations where there's a genuine, as a hadith itself mentioned, without an uzr, the person is excused. But it is a fard obligation on each person. There is no Jum'ah for the outskirts, for the countryside. This is the awali, the hills around Madinah Munawwarra. So Imam Malik narrated that Ibn Shihab, who narrated from Abi Ubayd, the freed slave of Ibn Azhar, who said that I had prayed Eid with Uthman ibn Affan, meaning during the Khilafah of Uthman radiallahu anhu, that he was, obviously the Khalifa also led the Salat, or Bakr and Umar, Uthman, Ali, they led the Salat in Masjid, the Imams of the Masjid Haram as well, Masjid Nabawi, and they were, so I prayed Eid, and there were the Imams in Eid, as well the rulers are supposed to lead the Eid. How many of our rulers can actually lead Salat, let alone Eid Salat? So he led the Eid Salat, and he prayed Eid Salat with him, and then he came and he prayed, and then he did a khutbah. They did Eid, meaning the first Salat is prayed, then the khutbah is done, right? One of the Khalifas tried to engineer, swap it around, because the khutbah, the Salat is wajib, and that you should attend, but the khutbah, listen to khutbah sunnah. So khutbah is afterwards, so everyone will just get up, they pray the Salat, then they get up and they probably do their Eid Mubaraks and so what he did was he wanted people to listen to him. So he swapped it the other way around, which the Imams of the time refuted, that this is the incorrect way of doing it. The Salat is first, then it's the khutbah. That he said, Allah has gathered for you 2 Eids, because the Eid was on the day of Jum'ah. So there's two Eids, because the weekly Eid for the mu'min is the Juma, is a Eid, the weekly Eid that we have. But whoever from the Aliyah, meaning from the hills of outside of Madinah Munawwarra, they can either wait for the Juma. They could wait. Whoever loves, they can wait for the Juma. But if whoever wants to leave, they can leave. Generally, what they used to do, Juma was a whole city supposed to gather. That's why in the old cities, we have like the Jama Masjid. And the Jama Masjids were very big, because the whole city is supposed to pray there. Used to grab the whole community. The populations were not so as big as they are now. Then there's a discussion about the اتفقوا على لا جمعة في العوالي, outskirts villages. They don't have to do, if there's small people live in like 2-3 families here and they live in another 2, they don't have to do Juma. It's not compulsory upon them to do Juma. And then there's a discussion if the ruler or the governor turns up there, because he's the one supposed to lead the Juma. Like the Wali, the governor of the Khalifa appointed, the ruler appointed, he's supposed to, if he turns up in the place, then it is a Juma established there. So, but Imam Shafi Rahimahullah, he says, every village in which there is 40 free men who are muqimeen, who are residents, they're not travelers. So if there's a musafir, if there's 39 muqims, residents living in that town, men who are free, not slaves, they are praying, and one musafir comes, then the condition is not fulfilled for Juma. Juma is not to be done. وَلَا تَنْعَقِدْ, because it's not established. According to Imam Ahmad Hanbal has the same view as well. 40,
how many should be?
40 according to Imam Shafi'i Rahimahullah.
40 people.
40. Imam Ahmad Hanbal is well 40. بأربعين رجل كذلك والوالي ليس بشرط. And to have a ruler, the wali or his representative, the ruler and his representative is not a condition. Imam Hanifa said لا جملة إلا في مصر جام أو في فنائه وتناقض بأربعة والوالي شرط. Right? So Imam Abu Hanifa Rahimahullah says that the Jum'ah cannot be done except in a built-up city, a built-up town, right? Or in its outskirts, right? In its like it's in the outskirts or in the edges. And it is, you only need 4 people, but it should be officially, like this should be an official Jum'ah, and the wali is, that's, even if you go to Malaysia you can't just do Jum'ahs anywhere. They have a very systematic way of establishing a Jum'ah. So they have to make like a masjid, they call it surah, musalla. It's not the ruler the sultan, each province had a sultan, like a king, and they sign off on religious matters. So then the musallas in Australia, it's free for all, One Jummah's here, next street you can make a Jummah and a masjid, And some imams, like Imam Ahmad Hanbal, is like, you cannot do a Jummah, it's not permissible. The Jummah, second Jummah is not even acceptable when there's a Jummah is already in one area. If you unnecessarily establish another Jummah, like we have 2 Jummahs here because of the numbers. We have an uzr, we can't accommodate like in one Jummah everybody. So we have to do 2 Jummahs. But like let's say one masjid is not enough, you have to build another masjid up the road to then there's an excuse there because one masjid is not big enough. There's a reason to do that. But just unnecessarily establishing a Jummah as an Eid left and right wholesale like the way we do in Australia without even, so over there when they build a musalla, they have all these, like a committee has to be done, a certain structure, all the conditions for masjid and adhan, and it has to be a minara, and like they have like a list of conditions, criteria they have to fulfill. Once all is fulfilled, it's presented to a government department, then they will be, the qibla, they send somebody from the government to come and check the qibla on the masjid, right? This masjid, how those who remember the qibla was, that's why we have the mihrab. For those who don't know why the mihrab is over there, why it's not in the center. So for a long time we were praying on a slight angle. There are a few masjids in Melbourne like that. But actually, the oldest masjid, Carlton, actually is correct. It's actually perfect. That matters in fiqh because the first masjid of the city is looked at as well. That the qibla should be based on the first masjid. The first masjid is supposed to be done properly. Alhamdulillah, in our city it's done properly. There was a Malaysian brother, he doesn't trust any masjid he used to pray in. He came to do his PhD. He didn't trust any masjid he prayed in Australia, asked our calculations. So every masjid he used to go to, he used to check make sure it's all proper. And then a few years ago, many years ago now, 5-6 years ago, maybe longer, my father, when he was alive, then this brother, he sent a thing, goes, no, your qibla is off. By 23 degrees, I think we're off. And no, it doesn't. Don't like you're making the people bad who prayed here for 30 years. Like no, it's salat is fine. You know, you're in the jihah of the qibla, the general direction. So you're okay, inshallah. But some people said our salat 30 years is not accepted, and you're changing it. And I said, well, if it's not accepted for 30 years, which it is, inshallah, now you're going to continue doing the same mistake, you know. So yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you don't know and then you try, the asl is that we're given a hukam to face the qibla. And if you're forced, if you don't know and then you're traveling and you try your best and then you get as best you can, and that's what they did in the 80s when we didn't have Google Maps and all that sort of stuff, and that information was not available. But I had it checked. Brothers got very upset over it. I had it checked. They only listened to the Imam's word, or assistant Imam at that time word. So I had two brothers, they're captains of ships, port managers. So they use their ship's computer because they have to calculate. The only two people that can help you with this thing is pilots and ship captains, probably. You know, maybe somebody else. But they actually practically do the job to calculate the shortest route on the surface of the earth. That's the masala regarding the qibla. I went diverged into another topic, but they calculate it. They send me the details. Yeah, I actually prepared it and sent it to them. Then they checked it and they used their computers in the ships in Port Melbourne, and they came. They said, yeah, that's correct. That's the. So we were lucky that the qibla was dead. It's actually we were praying on an angle, but it came straight with the building. The committee was happy because we can fit more people in the masjid now. You know, alhamdulillah, worked out, and now we can say confidently that George Street is the qibla. You know, so any of those Christian groups come, sometimes I just remind them always that if you want a qibla is straight, direct. Every time they drive on George Street, they have to think about the hopefully the qibla, Allah give them hidayat, inshallah. Anyway, plant a seed, inshallah. So there's a difference of opinion regarding this. Imam Malik, if a jama'ah is in a village with houses that are connected, so a small settlement, and in it there's a market and a masjid, then Juma is. So they try and establish that Juma is not for like a scattered house in the country, a single lone house. Juma is where there's a community established, that you bring that community together in a weekly congregation, right? And they came up with different. Imam Hanif would condition, even though he said the minimum people is 4, but you have to do it in a town, an established town. And there's a description mentioned in other books about 4,000 people, 8,000 people, I can't remember the top of my head, should be in a township of that size. Is less than that, small, very small towns, Juma is not to be done. And there's some similar discussion about that. The next section is about there's no Juma upon the sick person or the musafir. If they prayed it, the fard is fulfilled. They don't have to pray dhuhr. They're excused. They fulfill the obligation. It's not fard upon them. And a musafir is excused from Juma. But if he's at a masjid, he's traveling and he stopped, let's say, you know, like sometimes we're traveling in a Muslim country and you're on a highway traveling a long distance, you're a musafir. You can shorten your prayers, join your prayers, and so forth. Then Juma is there in the local village masjid. You stop there. You pray to Juma. Although it's not fard upon you, but now you fulfilled the obligation, and hence you're excused from, you don't have to pray dhuhr. Right? Even though it was not fard upon you, but you did it, and now. So in the end, who is Juma wajib? In the Hadith it's come that Juma is wajib, necessary to be done, compulsory to be done, on every Muslim except for a woman, illa imra'atan aw sabiyan aw mamlukan. It's not compulsory on a woman, it's not compulsory on a child, it's not compulsory on a slave. They can come to Juma, but it's not wajib upon them. For the men, it's wajib, right? So we have, this is full on Juma. The ladies are here. They're coming here on Juma. They're full. It's fine. They can come. And it's good that they come because they can hear some thing. Look, there is a legitimate fiqh position that women should not come to the masjid, and there is a legitimate fiqh position that women should come to. They are allowed to come to the masjid, right? There's a debate on this, right? But when I talked to my father, rahimahullah, about this, he said, listen, in this time and age, where the ladies go everywhere, and you're going to tell them they can go, in a society where the women don't go anywhere. There are ladies that live in compounds in their families, in traditional societies. They don't go anywhere, let alone the masjid. Here, they can go to Westfield. They can go pick up the kids. right? They go to the local milk bar. The list is very long. All the things that they go to Pilates and yoga. No, I'm just all the other things, activities that they go to, right? And the only place they can't go is the masjid. My father's argument was that based, and he said, in here we put curtains and it's segregated. They have their own entrance. There's no possibility of, there's the odd one or two that will just walk here, doesn't care. But generally they have hijab and they can come and they have their privacy and they have a separate wudu area. All the conditions are there to avoid that. And if they're here, they'll actually learn something. This is my father, rahimahullah, he argued, they will actually hear something, they will learn something, will benefit them. Right? I remember I went to Ahmedabad in Gujarat, in India, and they went to the Jama Masjid there. It's an old masjid, 500-year-old. Ahmed Shah, the king that built it. And they had the ladies section. So the way they built the masjid was this old Jama Masjid. It's got like 200 pillars and so forth. And so the way they built the masjid, they put thought into it. They allowed the women the space in the masjid. So the ladies section was built on top, right? But the way it was, and the mesh, the way it's built that they can hear everything that's happening. Like there's no microphones in those days. But whatever classes like this is going on, let's say, they can hear it. The way they made the design, that all the sound from the masjid, the qira'ah, everything can go, so they can benefit, participate by listening to those durus. That was one thing. The entrance to the ladies section, the stairs were built from the front, right? So they're coming from the front wall of the, if I remember correctly, it was the front wall, the masjid stairs up, like the entrance here, and the men coming from the back, like the normal, like the old masjids, like that. So there's not even like why that matters, because in Masjid Rasulullah, that masjid, this Babun Nisa built for a reason. Right? That a separate door was constructed to the side, so the men and ladies, women can go one way, the men can go. Like Islam doesn't, hijab is not just about a piece of material; it's about intermingling unnecessarily as well. Just this last point regarding this, that so it's not wajib on women, it's not wajib on children, it's not wajib on slaves, and is one narration mentioned that or sick person, ill person. Sick person could mean a person who becomes sick if he comes sick. Let's say it's cold, the weather's really bad, the person's going to become sick, or they're already sick, and by coming to it, they'll be put into it'll be pain for them, and their sickness might be, their recovering from their sickness might be delayed, right? Or their sickness might increase. Then they're excused. So there's no Juma. It is not composed on a marid, sick person, or traveler, or a woman, or a slave. And if any of them do pray, they do come to the Juma and they do pray it, then the fard is fulfilled for them, even though it was not fard upon them to do it. And it is valid to pray behind. The majority view is in Minhaj, which is Shafi fiqh book, وَتَصِحُ خَلْفَ الْعَبْدِ وَالصَّبِيُّ وَالْمُسَافِرِ. It's valid behind a slave, a child, and musafir in the most obvious, apparent view of the school. Imam Ahmad said no, that if he's not from the people of Juma, then from the people of Juma, like it's not wajib upon him, then his leading of Juma is not, he's not counted among the 40, and his leading the Juma is also not valid as well, because he's not from one of the people that's fard upon them. Inshallah, we'll continue. There's just for the rewards of Juma, because tomorrow is a Juma, just to remind, the hadith is in Tirmidhi, that a person who comes really early for Juma, and this is a hadith considered sahih hadith, authentic hadith, and in the sahih hadith, this is the greatest fadila. What I learned from my teachers is the greatest reward that is there in Islam. That a person who does a ghusl, does a good ghusl, and wakes up, comes very early, and then comes and listens to the Imam, and doesn't jump over people, and listens quietly without talking during the Jummah, and sits close to the mimbar, that for every step that he takes is a reward of, does anybody know? 1 year of fasting, 1 year of tahajjud. The hadith in Tirmidhi is Sahih hadith, and this is considered the greatest fadila, like in the Sahih hadith, that a person, if he walks 1,000 steps, it's 1,000, it's a kilometer, right? Maybe it's less than a kilometer, right? It's probably 500 meters, right? 1,000 steps, 1,000 years of, not 1,000 days, 1,000 years of fasting, 1,000 years of tahajjud, right? I mean, this is like something that we should avail, and it's available to us every week. Someone asked me this week, my brother asked about forgiveness from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How much forgiveness? Like, what's the chance? He wanted he goes, what's the chance of me going to hell? To Jahannam. So I said, look, listen. Firstly, and should we be hopeful? He's really stressed out. Well, firstly, all our sins are multiplied by how many times? They're one. They're just multiplied one. If you think of a sin and you don't act upon it, the Hadith of Rasulullah says what? That you get one hasana written for you. You thought of a sin and you didn't do. So there's mashaykh that used to consciously think of sin and said, Ya Allah, I'm not doing this. Right? To get this reward of leaving sin. Right? They think of the sin and then they would say, Ya Allah, I'm not doing this consciously out of your rida, for your pleasure, to increase their reward. Right? If you do the good deed, it's multiplied 10 times. If you do the sin, it's only written once. Then your deeds are weighed in the scales, right? And I was teaching this week about the Imam Safarini Rahimahullah's book on Aqidah, one of his books on Aqidah, the section about the scale. What's a scale? That's a translation, yeah. But what is it? And how would you, and they discussed, because he mentioned that if it goes down, what's going up? If your good deeds go down, the pan of the good deeds, what goes up? The sins. But sins don't, and then they have discussion because Allah mentioned that the good deeds are lifted. There's a whole discussion. How would you know? And then he said that the scales actually don't move. There's a light that the good deeds have. There's a whole discussion, all these hadiths and so forth. It's quite an elaborate discussion. Just about the scale, the details of the scale. What's happening? What's weighed?
They are measured and weighed both.
Yeah, but what's weighed in the scale?
Nia.
Huh?
Nia.
Not but near, but what's weighed? Is it the deeds that are weighed or the scrolls on which is written? The suhuf, the angels wrote. So what's put in the scale? There's a whole. I just started whole another discussion, but just I thought I'd mention to you that. So the brother, I said, listen. Firstly, if your sins are 1 million and your good deeds are, I'm assuming this is how the scale works, right? As far as we're told, the scales. And your bad deeds are 1 million and your good deeds are 1,000,001. Just based on this. Then what's happened? The scale will tip in your favor of. So all those, they become irrelevant in a sense, to a certain degree. They become irrelevant. Inshallah, you will not go to Jahannam. And my father, Rahimahullah, used to say this, that there are so many ways to get maghfirah, that it seems like impossible that you'll get to Jahannam. So our Imam Ibn Qayyim, Rahimahullah, said it beautifully. He said, for the person traversing this spiritual journey towards Allah, that he flies under two wings of hope and fear, raja and khawf. You need both. You need to be fearful, but the fear should not be so much that you become despondent, give up. But it should not be so less that you become overconfident. Allah's Ghafoor Rahim, I'll do whatever. No, you have to be. The fear has to be there. There are consequences, and the hope should not become overconfidence. The hope should not go out of extremes, go over limit. That I can do whatever I want, and then like that. And it should be not too less. So the two wings and the head of that bird, he said, Rahimahullah, Ibn Qayyim said this, he goes, the head of that is love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And a person generally should move like this in his life until he comes to the end of his life. Then his hope should be more. His raja, his hope on the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala should be more. And there's a book that someone gave about all the hadiths on the mercy of Allah. When you read all the hadiths, I was reading with my brother, we read in Ramadan just one night, we just read into the whole book and said, no one's going to Jahannam. It gives you so much hope when you read it, that there is that we should be expecting the rahmat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We should be striving. Rahmat of Allah doesn't mean you sit and do nothing. You should strive for the rahmat of Allah. Try to get the rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us understanding.